I'm going to, recording has started. I'd like to welcome everyone to this town hall meeting. My name is Dan Clark. I'm the director of the Local Government Center. We're hosting this in conjunction with the League of Cities and Towns in partnership with them. And we're glad all of you have joined us this morning. As a little bit of a reminder for how these are structured, we'll go through.
When you are finished recording, you may hang up or press pound for more options.
Who wants to press pound? I want to hear what these options are. All right, so so there's an example. If you're not talking or asking a question or making a comment, please mute your phone. And the other option is if you want to be recognized, we can recognize you to give you the floor. You can do that by in the participant list. If you hover next to your name, you'll see a hand, a little icon of a hand, and click on that. That will show me that you are raising your hand. You will move to the top of the queue and we will call on you, and you can then unmute and ask your question. As I mentioned, this session will be recorded. When it's done, we will post this on our website, as well as we'll share it with the league, and they can post it on their website as well. If there are people in your organization that are unable to participate, they can always watch the video later on. It's riveting. It's riveting TV to watch it later on. So you think it's great live, boy, watch it a second time and it's even better. With that, I think I'm going to turn the time over to our esteemed colleague, Kelly Lynch from the League of Cities and Towns.
Good morning, everybody. Kelly Lynch here, talking to you from the floor is where I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks until the session ends. Today, instead of listening to me drone on, we get to have a much more exciting presentation from Mike Wallace, who is, I believe, and correct me if I get this wrong, Mike, Legislative Director of Community and I think I wrote down Economic Development.
That's it.
Right?
Yep.
From the National League of Cities. He's going to give you kind of a wrap up of ARPA, the American Rescue Act plan, and then also if he has a moment, just give us kind of a teaser on what the infrastructure discussions are looking like for that coming bill. So without further ado, Mike, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate having the time here. I think I'm sharing a screen. Do you guys see it slides there? Great. Okay. So first, I just want to say, thank you to the league and the great partnership that you've provided to NLC, particularly the advocacy over the past really difficult year where we all been, helping our residents to get through and overcome the coronavirus emergency and everything that went with that. The American Rescue Plan, truly, it's something that would not have been enacted with the state and local aid in there if it hadn't been for the really strong cooperative work between all the state leagues and the National League of Cities, really just drumming the same drumbeat for a year about the urgent need at the local level. So the American Rescue Plan Act passed last month. Just to provide the context for what the funds are intended for, this is still rescue dollars. This isn't really the recovery package. It's rescue. I guess it's partly recovery too, but the upcoming infrastructure package really has its eyes squarely focused on recovery. The Rescue Plan Act provides urgent funding to stabilize, first off, government operations. That's what we're looking at, but the households and small businesses, so that really trying to keep people stable for the rest of the year while the vaccine rollout continues, so that when the economy fully reopens, our residents can get back to work, small businesses can resume normal operations as quickly and seamlessly as possible without bringing a lot of obstacles and anchors from the past year with them. And by that, I mean things like, dings on your credit report, difficulty in finding, leases, whether small businesses had to restructure their debt, go through bankruptcy, really providing resources to help people overcome these obstacles that came about as a result of coronavirus, so that they can get back into their lives and back into the financial mainstream quickly. The bill is a major accomplishment. For the first time ever, all 19,000 municipal governments, that's cities, towns, and villages, are entitled to a direct, non-competitive federal formula grant from the U.S. Department of Treasury. This is not like general revenue sharing, where states received a lump sum, took some off the top, sent it to the counties, they took their piece, and what was left was here for the cities. This is 3 funding streams. The funding stream for local governments is walled off and protected. These are funds that your communities are entitled to. You do not have to submit an application for them.
To
You do
review
not
the
have.
message, press 1.
You
To
do not have
send the
to.
message now, press 2. To
I know.
re-record the message,
I'm
press
impressed
3.
with the
To
dedication of
cancel
the operator
delivery of
here.
this message and hang up, press 4.
So as to say, you don't have to comply, you don't have to apply, but you also don't have to demonstrate need in any way to justify or demonstrate justification for receiving these funds.
To
The bill
review
is
the message,
passed.
press 1.
You're entitled
To
to.
send the message now, press 2. To re-record the message, press 3. To cancel delivery of this message and hang up, press 4.
I'm working on it. I'm
You're
working on it.
It's no problem. Some people question whether this is truly direct funding because the states play a role for small cities. We
To
say
review the message,
it is direct
press 1.
funding.
To send the message now, press 2. To re-record the message, press 3. To cancel delivery of this message and hang up, press 4.
If there's a mute to all, but
We're gonna do that. Mute all.
got it. Okay. So
To
anyway,
review the message, press 1.
There we go. Direct funding means, you're all entitled to it. Aid obligated municipalities is not in any way mingled or co-mingled or obligated to state or county governments. It's a protected stream. If states fail to carry out their responsibilities to ensure the funding gets to the smaller cities, there's stiff penalties for them, and there's steps that the federal government can take to make sure that smaller cities get the funds that they are entitled to by law under this bill. So what's in it for state and local governments? $360 billion total out of the $1.9 trillion bill. The states get $195.3 billion. I want to make a point. It'll be clear why it's important later. States get about 60 cents of every dollar in state and local aid under this bill. Cities get about 40 cents of every dollar under this bill. That means that there's no reason for so states have been taken care of, in other words. So if you're at the Capitol and states are talking about how their state aid is helping local governments, there's no reason to cut state aid to local governments because states are well taken care of here. The other thing I would say about that too is for cities and towns, we're getting $65.1 billion. That's half of the $130.2 dedicated to all localities. So nationally, counties will get half the funds, and nationally, cities will get half the funds. That doesn't mean within your state, the county and the city will both split an amount equally. It's a national split, and in some cases, some states, counties will end up with a little more, and some states, cities will end up a little more because of the way the formula for calculating grants works that I'll explain in the next slide. There's also a new capital project fund that was put in at the last minute. It's a $10 billion block grant to states for broadband. $10 billion for broadband now in the bill. What you ought to be doing now too, it's so new that most states haven't already figured out how they're going to spend these funds. If you have a municipal broadband project or something like that, we think those grants are going to work like the coronavirus relief fund, where states will get these dollars for broadband, but then states will be permitted to send payments from that fund down to localities. Not required to, like CRF, but permitted to. So if you have municipal broadband or a private partner building out your broadband services and need and could use public dollars to help with that, the build out of that infrastructure, now's the time to be talking to your states about what their plans are, your state, what their plans are for that new $10 billion fund, of which every state will get a piece. So here's the calculations. We calculated, NLC calculated, cities in a combined way have lost about $90 billion in revenue over the COVID year. So $90 billion less in revenue coming into coffers, unanticipated revenue decline. The bill provides $65.1 billion. So what this tells us is Congress does not intend this to be a dollar for dollar replacement of your lost revenue. It does not intend for this program to make any locality completely whole compared to their losses. This is lifeline dollars, rescue dollars to stabilize local government operations, to address the unanticipated revenue shortfalls and the unbudgeted expenditures you had to make. But it's also lifeline dollars for your residents and for your small businesses who also encountered unexpected wage losses, unexpected business losses, and had to comply with public orders to maintain social distancing and other things like that, which ultimately probably was costly to those folks. So this is stabilization money to get people ready to return to the financial mainstream and back to business as usual. How grants are calculated for municipalities. 70% of funds are of the municipal fund are set aside for those cities with more than 50,000 residents. 30% of funds are set aside for cities with less than 50,000 residents. The 50,000 demarcation is a census designation that designates the city a metro city, essentially is what it's called. For metro cities, those cities over 50,000, they have to not jump through hoops, but there's more targeted funding for them than for the small cities. Congress prioritized targeting to need as much as possible. We looked at different possible targets. We looked at actual dollar revenue losses that turned out to be impossible to collect because nobody has a central repository of municipal budget data that's reliable for all municipal budgets across the country. We looked at transmission rates. The problem with targeting funds to transmission rates is that it's just a snapshot in time and it does not count for people who either don't have symptoms or are not reporting into the system that they have COVID. What the formula is, it's a long-standing anti-poverty formula. It's used for the CDBG program. Funds are calculated by measuring population plus poverty rates plus rates of housing instability for those cities over 50,000. So if you take two comparably sized cities with greater challenges around poverty and housing will get a little more funding under this calculation than cities that are doing a little better. For cities under 50,000, we wanted to prioritize simplification as much as possible so that you could use those funds quickly, recognizing that smaller cities have fewer staff. And if a smaller city has to furlough or lay off people, it's much more impactful than if a big city with a bigger staff have to do that. So for cities under 50,000, the calculation is a simple per capita calculation. Cities under 50,000, funding will be allocated simply by population. For cities over 50,000, funds will be delivered directly from the Department of Treasury. There is no middleman at all. That's about 1,000 cities across the country. For cities under 50,000, that's about 18,000 cities across the country. Treasury is going to send a lump sum to each state for sub-allocation to smaller municipalities. The language in the bill is clear that states shall pass through these dollars. The language in the bill is clear. States cannot take funds off the top for administrative purposes. The bill is also clear. States cannot put additional expenditure limitations on those funds beyond what Congress and Treasury say are these expenditure categories. Treasury has 60 days to get the funds out. So by May 10th or May 11th, funds will be made available to localities. For cities getting their funds directly from Treasury, that means they'll have access to their funds by that date. For cities under 50,000, that means Treasury has to release the lump sum to the states. After those 60 days, states have an additional 30 days to sub-allocate those funds directly down to smaller local governments. So it's more of a 90-day window. The bill also gives states the possibility to request extension beyond 30 days if they need it. Ultimately, they can extend up to 120 days. Now, at the end of 120 days, if states still haven't allocated those funds, Treasury can begin penalizing the states by clawing back ARPA dollars back from the state's dollars, claw those back in an amount equal to the amount that the states haven't sub-allocated to small towns. And then Treasury can sub-allocate those directly for you. So it's a very strong incentive for states to carry out their responsibilities under the bill and pass those dollars down. And like I said, states are also well taken care of under the bill. This is not an onerous exercise for the state governments. There's also a small, this only applies to smaller cities under 50,000, a small cities cap. Like I said, Treasury or the Congress did not have access to detailed data when it comes to small cities budgets. They only had access to census data, so they couldn't perform a set of precise calculations to figure out how much funding ought to go to each small locality. As a result, the way the formula works, without any sort of restrictions, in some cases, small cities, particularly the smaller you get, the larger your grant looks. So in some cases, a small community would get a grant 3 or 4 times as large as a one-year budget for that locality. Like I said earlier, this is not intended to be a dollar-for-dollar replacement. So the bill includes a cap. Small city grants cannot be greater than an amount equal to 75% of the city's most recent pre-pandemic budget. We don't know exactly what's going to count in terms of a calculation of what a budget size is. We actually have a call with Treasury next week with different local budget experts from representing all sizes of cities and towns to bring them up to speed on local budgeting practices, different state requirements for local budgeting, that sort of thing, so they can understand. We're pushing them to take the most expansive view of budget as possible. So they're not just looking at the general fund, that they include all sources of revenue coming into the municipality and all responsibilities. So if you have a if you have municipally run utility, for instance, that would count. Fines and fees would count. Every source of revenue we want it to count. But that 75% cap is in there, so there doesn't occur an overpayment that would be politically unpalatable to Congress and could cause some sort of backlash. It is a blunt instrument, but it's in there. Why am I spending a lot of time on this? You may have seen estimates of grant sizes for your municipality. Congress drew these up to inform the debate. These are a good set of estimates. Let me go to the next slide here. I think it's here. Yeah, if you see the link there at the bottom, we've put those estimates up on our website if you haven't seen it yet. They're a good ballpark figure of what of the kind of funding we're talking about here. The estimates that currently exist are not 100% accurate. In fact, the estimates that exist cities should not expect to receive to the exact dollar the amount of funding in those estimates. That's because Congress only had access to census data. The bill gives Treasury permission to supplement census data with state-derived data and locally derived data so that they can make sure that each and every municipality gets the funding that they're entitled to, and they make the correct calculations down to the penny, so all $65.1 billion gets allocated out to you. So if you have those estimates, don't start budgeting for them to the exact penny, but know that by May 10th or May 11th, we'll have a completely accurate calculation of what's at stake for your municipality. 2 other points I wanted to make from the previous slide. Your funding will come to you in 2 tranches. So you're not going to get it all at once. You'll get half of the amount you're due as soon as May 10th or May 11th. And then 12 months after you receive your first allocation, the rest of your funds will be released to you. This should make it a lot easier to spend, frankly, being able to spend over those 2 years. And I forgot my second point was, but the most important point probably here is that you have to have your funds spent by December 31st, 2024. That's the expenditure deadline. Anything that's not spent by the end of 2024 has to be returned to the Treasury. And let me skip ahead a couple slides here. We sort of covered this. Eligible expenditures. We know the bill gives us 4 categories of spending, and we also know that the Treasury Department will interpret these things and give us more detailed guidance about what they mean. But in the first place, these funds are to respond to the negative consequences, consequences on both economy and public health related to COVID. What we think this means essentially is that these funds are not going to be any more restrictive than the funding that was provided under the CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund. So if the state passed funds to your city from the CARES Act and you use those funds to stand up some kind of new aid program, you should be able to funnel these new dollars directly into those programs without having to make a lot of significant changes. The bill allows cities to increase pay for frontline workers who qualify for hazard pay. It doesn't require it, but this is only for municipal employees, not anyone you're contracting with, but for public employees on the front lines who qualify for hazard pay. You can use these funds to pay them up to $13 an hour above their regular wages. Again, not required to do so, but you may do so. Most importantly, this bill allows for revenue replacement. That was the biggest problem with the CARES Act, is that it prohibited cities from spending on revenue replacement, so that you could not substitute dollars that you thought were coming in but didn't come in with those funds. With these, you can spend to account for revenue loss. So if you had to make cuts in services, downsize programs, lay off or furlough staff, you can restore back to the previous levels, all of those things with these dollars, because you can now spend on revenue replacement. One thing we've asked Treasury, if this is possible, if they would make sure to say that fines and fees count as local revenue. We know that a lot of residents who've lost wages are also have these different public fines and fees sort of hanging over their head. If you can use these dollars to replace that lost revenue, essentially paying those fines and fees on your residents' behalf to help those folks get a fresh start, the next logical thing to do would be to forgive those fines and fees to make sure that they don't continuously damage a person's credit report and help them get back into the economic mainstream and find work and everything that's involved in economic recovery. And lastly, the bill allows spending for investments in water, sewer, or broadband. We're asking Treasury to define that better so that we know exactly what kind of activities qualify. For instance, we've urged Treasury to include waste, water runoff, combined sewer overflows, those sorts of things. Take an advanced view of water, so that flood mitigation, for instance, so that cities can use those funds if that's a priority for them. Now, having said all these eligible expenditures, just keep in mind we have to wait for Treasury to issue its first guidance. We've urged Treasury to get the first guidance they put out as correct as possible. What we don't necessarily want is a new guidance issued week by week, sort of saying a rolling guidance like they did with the CARES Act, where they said, here's what you can spend on, and then they go back and fix that, and then they go back and correct that. We're trying to get as complete a picture of what's an eligible expenditure as possible from day one, so that cities can feel confident about spending to address their immediate issues quickly. There are some regulations in the bill. There's going to be more regulations from the Treasury Department, but these are the ones that we know right now. In terms of permissions, you can transfer payments from the funds that you're getting directly. You can transfer them to a private nonprofit organization. We view these dollars as a chance for cities to really increase their capacity and increase the sophisticated kind of interventions that they make to help residents and to help small businesses and others really overcome the challenges they face over the past year so they can get back to work. That capacity can be direct to your own employees, but it could also be a trusted nonprofit partner. If you have a nonprofit, for instance, if you're working with your Chamber of Commerce or Community Development Corporation or that sort of thing, to help you figure out how to allocate assistance to your residents, you can transfer these dollars to those entities to do that kind of work and help them do a better job. That second bullet point about transportation of passengers or cargo, that essentially means you can use these dollars to fund your public transit system. And you can transfer these to a special purpose unit of state and local government. So municipalities are getting funds, but things like fire districts, sanitation districts, library districts, they are not getting direct funds. But you may be in a situation where you want to help those districts overcome any losses that they have suffered. The bill permits you to transfer payments to those sorts of entities so that they can keep up their services. Again, you don't have to, but it's permissible. You can also transfer funds to councils of governments, metropolitan planning organizations. If you want to take a regional approach with your neighbors across jurisdictions, you can set up a regional entity to do that too, or use the existing regional entity. Restrictions, not too many, but there are some. A bright line restriction is you cannot deposit these funds directly into a pension account. Congress does not want to see these funds used in a way that would fix pre-existing challenges when in terms of pensions. And state governments are prohibited from using the funds under this bill for justifying state tax cuts. That's currently the subject of a lawsuit. We don't know if that provision is actually going to survive, but that's what the bill says right now. I'll say too, though, that restriction is not on local governments. That's specifically on state governments. There's nothing in the bill that says local governments, as a local stimulus measure, are prohibited from providing tax relief or direct stimulus payments. And our understanding from the authors of the bill is that they wanted to give cities the opportunity to do that without regard to saying whether that's the right course of action or not. We've asked Treasury to make it clear if that's the case or not. So don't plan for those activities until we get clear guidance from Treasury that is an eligible expenditure, if you want to go down that route. Finally, requirements, like I said, you're entitled to these dollars. The bill is passed, the funding is yours. But you do have to spend within the eligible categories, and you do have to make sure that you're maintaining records so that you can report back to Treasury. As a practical matter, 19,000 new grantees under a program, there's no way Treasury can systematically monitor the expenditures of all these new grantees. So what does that mean? It means in the long term, probably what will happen is Treasury inspectors generals will be going through the records and coming to cities and asking for an accounting of expenditures years and possibly decades into the future to figure out how these dollars were spent, to do an audit. There's no, we don't know systematically how that will work, but you want to make sure that your city is prepared to provide an accounting of these expenditures whenever it may happen. It could happen when everyone on your council right now has already gone and there's a new leadership in place. So you want to make sure you're looking toward the future so your potential new leadership in the future can easily access records saying how you spent these dollars to provide that back to Treasury to avoid any possibility of a clawback. But the other reason to do that is, you're going to want your future leadership to build on the success that you create with this infusion of new money, right? If you don't maintain an accurate record of how you spent and the policy goals you sought to achieve, your future leadership won't have anything to look at to be able to build on that success. So that's two reasons to maintain, diligent records and documentation about how you're using these funds. So that was, funding directly for local governments. That was the majority of what I spoke about, but this is a $1.9 trillion bill. There's lots of other aid in there. Some of that aid is also accessible to local governments, and some of that is accessible directly to your residents. In terms of funding for individual stimulus, everyone's getting a direct stimulus check if they qualify. In terms of income, we're saying that, that cities should step in and help residents make sure that they're on the financial path to financial mainstream if they get those dollars. For instance, if you have residents who are unbanked, who have bounced checks and are not allowed to access financial services, accessing financial services is crucial for anyone for economic mobility. If you have a financial institution in town who has a list of people who aren't allowed to do business with them, this is a great opportunity to go to your financial partners and say, hey, let's figure out how to get these people back into the banking system now that they're getting these big direct stimulus checks, and maybe teach them how to be more responsible and get them back into the financial mainstream. There's lots of tax credits in here: earned income tax credit, dependent care, child tax. The earned income tax credit has been expanded so childless couples can also claim it. The point here is that these benefits are expanded unemployment. These benefits only exist for your residents if they claim them. And I think it's important for local governments to consider themselves as having a role in making sure that your residents do claim them, because if they do claim them, that's more dollars that are staying in your community. Like I said, this funding is for government stabilization, but after you've stabilized your operations, you need to look to your residents, your small businesses, and make sure they're stabilized too. We heard in the CARES Act, cities concerned that they couldn't spend every dollar that they got. Their revenue situation didn't decline. That might be the case, but I can tell you, I know that's not the case for all your residents. So there's homeowner assistance, renter assistance, homeless intervention, utility assistance, especially important if there is municipal utility at stake, food and hunger, funding for new childcare opportunities. People can't get back to work if they don't have stable housing, if they don't have a safe place for their children, they're going to miss work. And once they miss work, any dollars that you put into workforce development for them are wasted. That's a wasted development as soon as they lose their job because they missed a day of work. So those supports around them are important. This bill is flush with those kinds of flush with resources for those kinds of supports. Make sure you're familiar with them so that you can help your residents take advantage of it. This is also a Main Street stabilization plan. So small business access to credit, there's many streams. There's funding for the Small Business Administration, the Paycheck Protection Program at Treasury, economic impact grants. What we saw with the CARES Act, though, is that for the local small businesses that were located in cities with small community banks that consider themselves stakeholders in the outcome of the community did really well. For cities that did not have a small community bank that were primarily served by big branches or by internet-only financial institutions, those are the kinds of institutions that did not go the extra mile for Main Street businesses. They saw that the work to process those applications was greater than the return that they would have got in terms of business. And so for small businesses and places that didn't have a community bank, they often were not able to access programs at SBA and Treasury. If that's the case for you, the bill also allows you to use your direct dollars to provide grants and loans directly to your Main Street businesses, essentially assuming the products and services of a financial institution for those small businesses if they can't access the funds from Treasury and Small Business Administration. There's targeted relief specifically for food service, for shuttered arts venues, theaters, that sort of thing. SBA has not stood those programs up yet, but we know that funding is there. And as soon as they set those programs up, we're going to be back out here telling you how your theaters, your arts venues, your restaurants can access those funds. There's money at the Economic Development Administration for economic adjustment assistance grants. If you're a community that has been disproportionately harmed by COVID, if a major employer has shut down as a result of lost business related to COVID, you are right for this kind of competitive grant. You can go to the Economic Development Administration and ask them for help to plot your way back out of a major loss like that, like a loss of a major employer, and how you can bring jobs back into your community. There's dollars there for that at EDA. And lastly, there's dollars there for transit agencies. We developed this set of 5 principles for you to think about right now before you get those dollars. Like I said, we're working on lots of different resources to help governments think about how they want to structure their recoveries, whether they want to structure it to prioritize closing gaps in racial equity that have intensified because of COVID, if they want to structure it to prioritize economic mobility and fresh starts for all residents, if they want to structure it, for other reasons, structure it toward transit, structure it toward housing stability. But prior to all that, here's a way to think about these funds. We're advising cities to use dedicated grants and programs first whenever possible. So your flexible dollars can be spent on housing aid, on small business aid, et cetera, but so can these other programs. Try to exhaust the funds from the other programs first before you spend your dollars on that. Save your dollars as much as you can for gap funding, gap financing, providing dollars for things that aren't covered by the other categories in this bill. We're actually recommending that cities don't obligate every dollar they get as soon as they get it. We don't know what the next stage of recovery is going to look like. I sort of look at this year like a cocoon. We went into a cocoon for a year, but we can't come back out a caterpillar. You should not be building back to a pre-COVID status quo. We don't know if people are going to be returning back to downtown and using that commercial space. We don't know if online sellers are going to go back to commercial storefronts. So you want to have money to be able to pivot when you figure out a direction that makes sense for your own community, and not every community is the same. So don't feel like you have to obligate every dollar immediately. 2, assess government operations and community needs. I think I went on and on about this. Once you finish stabilizing your local government operations, make sure you're using these dollars in the best interests of your residents, your small businesses. Prioritize fiscal stability and returning to work. Save pet projects for earmarks. Not everybody supported this bill. There's going to be opponents of this bill who are looking to cast doubt on the usefulness of it. They're going to be looking for bad projects, essentially. This is not dollars you want to use to start, start a museum or something like that. You want to use these dollars for fiscal stability, restoring the economy, and getting people back to work as much as possible. We are collecting stories and plans for how cities are using these dollars because we know people will find what on the surface looks like a bad use of funds, even if it complies with the rules. We don't want to be on defense for 10 years explaining how we use these dollars. When someone points out to what they think is a bad use, we want to have 30 positive uses in the bank ready to talk about, so that we don't completely lose a media cycle on that sort of thing. So prioritize what Congress wants to see out of this bill. Maintain records, document success. We already talked about that. And lastly, your congressional delegation is part of your success. Congress is the reason why you have these dollars coming to you today. And that includes members of Congress who voted no on the overall package. We worked for a year on a bipartisan basis across the aisle, and we know that members who voted no on the overall package we know we had strong supporters for local government aid amongst those members. So when it comes to Republicans and Democrats, although this bill had to pass under reconciliation, which was a very partisan maneuver, when it comes to local government aid, we had significant support from Democrats and Republicans for this aid. For a lot of reasons, Republicans, voted no across the board on this measure, which is not at all a surprise considering they used reconciliation to pass it. But know that just because you may have members who voted yes or no, even if they voted no, they could have been working with NLC and your state league to get these dollars directed as quickly as possible down to the locality, and probably had an impact on the bill anyway. So you're going to want to invite them to ribbon cuttings, reopenings, make them part of your success. A big reason to do this is we think this is a paradigm shifting bill. We finally convinced Congress that it is possible to deliver aid directly to all municipalities. That means for future legislation, for future highways and transit bill, future highways bill, future energy bills, we can make the case that you don't need to necessarily just deal with the states as your middleman. The states are always going to be important to us. We need good functioning states, but will have increased their capacity to use those dollars on their own. And to keep that capacity up, they're going to need infusions of new dollars under new programs to operate. And we're going to be, as we always do, advocating for dollars directly to local governments. I talked about what NLC is working on. We're doing calls every Friday at 1:30. You have to register to be on those calls, but they're recorded. We invite the Treasury Department and members of the administration, members of Congress to also speak on those calls. We'll have people from the administration speaking on the next one. I talked about wanting your stories of success. There's a QR code here. If you have a specific question about an eligible use of funds, or you want to share a story about how you're using those funds, go to this website that we have at the bottom here or at the QR code, and there's a form there you can put that into. It'll come directly to us. We're also tracking, independently of that, how cities are intervening in the COVID crisis. So we've been tracking how cities have used their CARES Act funds. You have access to these. We have policy areas like business economic stability you see here. You can go to our website, find this spreadsheet of tens of thousands of different ways cities have used their funds to overcome COVID. You can search by city size and find cities that are similar to yours, see what they've done, and do research there if you're trying to find new, good, innovative ideas for what your city can do. And lastly, I got to make the pitch for direct NLC membership. Like I said, this success would not have been possible if it wasn't for local, the hundreds of thousands of local leaders taking our action alerts, acting on them, explaining what the urgent need to their congressional delegation. And so as a member of National League of Cities, you'll get that kind of information, and you'll see there that we're divided regionally. So that's my plug for that. And I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I was going to say, folks, just go ahead, either raise your hand, put something in the chat or the Q&A. I'll watch that, and Dan can help call on you. Thank you so much for that overview. And I did want to put a plug in for Montana, because we are 100% members of
That's right.
the
That's right.
LLC. So
That's right.
we love you.
The feeling is very mutual. Well, I say, well, now that you're members, make sure you join an NLC advocacy committee. I run our community and economic development committee. It is a fantastic group of about 100 local leaders of every political persuasion, every city size, all across the country, just solely focused on right now on housing stability and economic recovery.
Looks like Bill Cole has a question.
I do. You hear me okay there, Michael?
Yes.
Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. Very informative. I think you might have done this once before.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we'll do it a couple hundred times, I think.
Okay. The one question that I think is you'll hear whenever you talk to anybody from Montana is the following. Revenue replacement was an absolutely critical element of this. Montana cities and towns are funded primarily with property tax.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have a sales tax. The real estate market across our state, for the most part, is going gangbusters as it is across most of the United States. So property tax revenue has not declined. In some cases, it has gone up, not even, and potentially significantly so. So revenue replacement is not a good option. Some nickels and dimes with fees around the edges. In the CARES Act, we had a similar situation. Treasury issued a guidance that created a presumption that dollars spent on first responders during a large time period were presumed to be COVID-related response. Since most municipalities have provide police protection, fire protection, often that's their largest dollar item. That allowed those funds to go to very pressed general funds and replace general funds. Are we going to see the exact same thing here? And more broadly, what do we do when we're trying to just justify dollars to our general fund when we do not have that easy revenue replacement option?
Right. I think you'll have similar flexibility. So like I said, if you were able to use CARES funding in that way, that we think that you'll be able to use these dollars in that way too. And for this, revenue replacement is just one of the categories of expenditures. In terms of this federal government, you don't have to justify need. This bill has already passed, so it's coming to you. I would say in terms of property tax revenue, what we have shared with Congress is there's always a lag in the impact on property tax. So, it may be the case that revenue gets untouched, but it could be the case too that as you're doing new assessments 2 or 3 years out, you'll find out to the extent to which homeowners may have been missing payments, and that may be hidden from you, from your set of data right now, and it could show up in sort of future foreclosures. So keep an eye out on that, what the out years are going to look like. But I would also say, if your property tax revenue actually increased during the crisis, that says to me that you have a lot of high value housing going up in your area. And you may have an issue there around what kind of housing that low wage workers have access to. And these dollars would be useful for that as well.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
If we don't have questions, I'm wondering, Mike, could you just touch, a couple minutes on what we might see coming in the infrastructure bill?
Sure. So for the infrastructure, really it's an infrastructure and jobs bill. NLC has been advocating for a standalone infrastructure package for a long time, considering the crumbling state of our infrastructure, basically in every category: water, transit, transmissions, all those sorts of things, or new infrastructure needs around broadband. We are hopeful that this is going to be a bipartisan effort in Washington, it's really hard for anything right now to be bipartisan. It doesn't sound super promising. But what we're going to see in that bill is what you consider a traditional infrastructure package to address all those things. But there's also things in that bill that would address specifically housing supports, workforce supports, supports for elderly Americans. I think that's where the real controversy, the partisan controversy, comes into play. We won't really have a say, in that debate about what gets in and what gets out. Our priority, of course, is going to be focused on that infrastructure piece. What I would say about it there is that an infrastructure package is a maybe bill, that you shouldn't be planning for that funding yet. But there's a different bill coming, the Transportation and Highways Reauthorization Bill, which is a must-pass bill that we know is coming. So we're looking at both of those. We're working hard on the Highways and Transit Bill, which provides your normal transit funds to local governments. We're trying to redirect or make a difference in that bill so that more funding comes directly to local governments. Right now, I think the states still get most of the dollars out of the Highways and Transit Bill. So we're looking for a little bit more of a fair share there, that cities can be empowered to make the choices that they want to make. But when it comes to the broader infrastructure bill, that's still maybe money, and we're going to fight hard for it. We hope there's not too much spending fatigue. But in terms of the politics of it, the politics are kind of rotten. The politics are kind of there. We're going to do our best to work within them. But I know, your senators, are key moderates who have been successful at bridging the divide before, as part of the I forget what the coalition's called, but we know we'll be working closely with them to try to get as much support possible for this moving forward. It's possible it could go reconciliation route again, but I'm kind of skeptical that Congress is going to be able to pass something this large as a reconciliation measure again so soon after the first one. So I think that bipartisanship is going to be critical here. We're very vocal about the fact we'd like to see bipartisan support for it.
Great, thank you. Do we have any sense of when the Treasury guidance will be coming?
Yeah, we do. We know the bill says the money has to be made available in 60 days. That's May 11th. So we expect it before May 11th. I'll put it that way. Treasury's told us, that they're probably going to need all 60 days to get things right. We have urged them to give NLC and the state leagues a preview of the calculated grants coming to local governments so that we can do a final sweep to make sure every government is classified correctly, that every government appears on that list, so that everybody gets the dollars that they're entitled to under the bill. And so hopefully they'll be able to do that. So we have a big meeting with them next week. We're all on these topics. So after that meeting, we'll know a lot more details too.
Well, apparently you're just so thorough and straightforward that nobody has any questions. That's fantastic.
I know it's a lot of fun. It's hard to know where to start with all these new resources. That's hopefully the presentation helped. If you just keep thinking, step one, stabilize local government operations. Step two, assess what your residents and small businesses need. I think that is a pretty good way forward on how to use these funds.
And folks on the line, as you probably already know, our legislature is in the process of already allocating their amounts in House Bill 632. And Mike, if you hadn't already talked to Tim about it, it looks like they are doing a big chunk of their 910 million is going to a competitive local infrastructure grant program. And then if you want to do a one-to-one match or give 25% match of your direct ARPA funding, then they will just give you a direct allocation. So
I think that's great. That's great way to leverage funding between the two. We're monitoring for a good sort of state. There's been such bad blood between state and local since CARES Act. We really do want to see the good, innovative ideas for cooperation intergovernmentally and regionally. That's way better than some other states I've heard doing, talking about cutting state aid unless cities spend on particular categories. So kudos to what's happening in your state.
Yeah, it's looking really good. Well, thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Happy to help.
Excellent. I will follow up with you. I've got a couple questions about some things, just making sure we get the right language into our state law. So if you don't mind, after this, I'll probably give you a quick ring.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
All
Dan,
right.
thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Michael.
Dan, did you want me to give just a quick overview for legislative?
Yeah, if you want to catch us up as to where we're at right now, and then what you think, moving forward as well might be helpful for the group to anticipate how they can help you with the legislature.
Yeah, so we are in kind of the crunch time here at the legislature. They are moving very, very quickly. The rumor now is that they are going to try and be out of here between 2 to 3 weeks from now. And we don't know whether or not they're going to sine die and just be done, or if they're going to leave some time for them to come back after we receive Treasury guidance and be able to fix anything to reflect what the Treasury tells them they can or can't do with the money. So that's kind of where we're at. Things are looking really good in terms of our revenues. We're not seeing any concerns. So we're kind of just riding herd on that and making sure everything stays nice and smooth. The marijuana bills are now kind of the focus of everything. There are 5 proposals kind of floating around and supposedly going to be mashed together in some kind of version that everyone can live with in terms of both where the money goes and what kind of restrictions are put on it and how much of a role the state plays in licensing and oversight. So we're watching that. You guys probably know about that takings bill, SB 260. Some amendments are supposedly being worked on, and we're hoping the end result is that the local governments come back out of that bill. But we'll be watching that very closely, and you might see a email blast request go out depending on how those amendments end up looking. Our nutrients bill is doing really well, SB 358. That has come out of committee and going to the House floor probably today. And we expect that to go back to the House for a quick approval of the amendments and get that up to the governor's desk. So that's great news for our wastewater operators and your bottom line cost dollars in terms of what you're going to be facing for infrastructure in your wastewater treatment plants in the coming years. We're hoping that we've come up with an approach that might be a national model for how to get away from numeric and cost taxpayers less dollars and actually clean up the water even better than we can under numeric standards. And then just a couple of outlying ones. That special districts bill is still going. We're trying to get a fix for existing districts that weren't created by a vote. So we'll keep you up to speed on what's happening there. And then there's still a TED bill out there, SB 388, that cuts the increment. And we need to make sure that goes down because we don't want them to get any kind of foot in the door in terms of cutting that increment calculation. So we're working pretty hard on that one. I think, the only other one right now is kind of, we don't know what's happening, is that final gun bill in the public buildings where it takes away all your authority to regulate in your public buildings, courthouses, city hall. And we are watching that very closely. It was going to be tabled, but it looks like it might come out of committee today. So we're hoping it'll die on the floor. So if you want the numbers for any of those, let me know. If you have follow-up questions for any of those, let me know.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Kelly on any of those bills or other bills that she may not have mentioned?
It's Friday and we want to go. This is just make it stop.
Anything else for the good of the order before we conclude this session? I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see any hands raised. I don't see anyone frantically waving to get attention. Well, this is great. Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you appreciate you organizing and getting Michael to participate with us today from the league or the National League. I thought his presentation was very, very good, and we look forward to hearing more from Treasury and how that's going to shake out. So I'm sure you'll keep us posted as that unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys can go to our website and find not only what we have and what we know locally, but also a lot of the links to the National League of Cities resources that Mike mentioned.
All right. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this was recorded. We should have this recording rendered later today, and I will then email it to the league, and hopefully Amanda can get it posted on their website so you can access it hopefully later today, if not early next week.
Someone asked if Mike's presentation would be available for printing, so I will get that from him and get it up on our website.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah. Great. Nothing like drinking from a fire hose this early in the morning on a Friday.
Right? Not enough coffee, you guys. Geez.
All right. Well,
Well,
thank you,
thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
We'll see you next time.